My name is Sophia. I'll be turning 27 this year. While the last 5 years of my life may seem like a happy marriage on paper, in reality, they've been a test that grows more difficult each day. The man who once made my heart beat wildly, who promised me the sky, has now become a stranger who constricts my life and takes my breath away. Now I just call him my ex-husband, because losing someone often begins long before the divorce is signed. When I first met him, he was like a storm that turned my world upside down. His confident gaze, his insistent attention, and his passionate demeanor drew me in. I thought he truly saw me and cared for me. But after we tied the knot, that passion took a completely different turn. His love wasn't a breath of fresh air, but a heavy chain weighing down my back. Even in the early days of our marriage, I noticed the change. The man who once brought me flowers and left me little notes was gone. In his place was someone who gave his orders without hesitation, who treated me like a servant in his home. What I thought had changed him wasn't love, but habit. He kept me in his life not because he loved me, but because he now considered me a possession. And there, in the shadows, loomed another name. Jane Dalton, my ex-husband's younger sister. She was 20 at the time. With her youth, her spoiled nature, and her reliance on her older brother, she became one of the invisible but greatest walls in our marriage. At first, I didn't think much of it. I even thought, how wonderful, the brothers get along so well. His frequent visits to our house, the warmth in which he hugged his brother, and the little surprises he made for us seemed normal to me. But marriage is like a curtain. When the spotlight goes out, all the darkness behind it is revealed. Soon, Jane's visits were no longer a courtesy. They became a rite. She came without knocking, like a shadow that appeared out of nowhere, at any hour of the day. She never brought anything with her, a loaf of bread, a chocolate bar, not even a small flower. Instead, she would wait for me to set the table, eat without a word of thanks, and then go to her brother's place for a long chat. She had made it a habit to ignore me. When she entered the house, her eyes would not go to me, but directly to my ex-husband. The first thing she said was always the same. "Brother, I came again." It was as if that house was just their shared living space, and my presence was like an invisible shadow, a silhouette lost among the furniture. But the most painful thing was my ex-husband's response to this behavior. A husband protects his wife, right? He sees her hard work and patience, but my ex-husband, on the contrary, normalized every single one of Jane's behaviors. He even went so far as to become angry with me. "Sophia, be a little more understanding when Jane arrives. It's your job to prepare for the guest." A guest? A guest doesn't come empty-handed. They say thank you. When they sit down at the table, they don't take anyone for granted. But for Jane, all the rules were suspended. Sometimes I had to sit at the table alone. While they sat on the couch and chatted with laughter, I'd make my own plate from the leftovers in the kitchen. I'd gather the dishes from the table and quietly carry them to the sink. Martin, still a little boy, would sometimes come to me, hold my hand, and look into my eyes. He might not understand everything, but he felt the coldness. His little heart experienced the pain of not being able to share his father's love at an early age. One evening, I was getting Martin ready for his bath. I handed him a small toy tub full of bubbles, and his eyes were sparkling. Just then, my ex-husband's voice echoed through the living room. "Sophia, come out now. Jane wants cake. Now go get it." It was almost closing time. Martin looked at me sadly. I didn't want to interrupt the moment I was about to spend with him, but I kept quiet anyway, grabbed my coat, and with a broken heart, my son's little finger in my hand, we walked together to the bakery. Martin kept talking all the way home. Should we get chocolate or strawberry? When he said, "Mom, should we get fruit?" My eyes welled with tears. His innocent excitement was overshadowed by his father and Aunt's selfishness. We arrived at the store a few minutes before closing. I bought Jane the cake she wanted, but I also chose a fruity strawberry-studded cake for Martin. I knew his little heart had been broken that night. When we got home, Jane bent over the cake and quickly pulled it onto her plate, but when she laid eyes on Martin's cake, a storm broke out inside me. Before I could even speak, my ex-husband pushed Martin's plate in front of Jane. "I earn this money. I decide who gets it." Tears streamed down Martin's face. His little hands were shaking as he tried to console himself by saying, "Mom, I love strawberry cake too." I couldn't help it at that moment. I picked up my son's plate, picked him up, and carried him into the room. Even though the anger inside me wanted to spill out, I kept quiet, because Martin's smile was more important than responding to every word my ex-husband said. But that night, something broke in my heart. Jane's spoiled bravado, my ex-husband's blindness, and my son's broken heart. All of them whispered to me, this marriage wasn't a fairy tale, but a darkening nightmare. As the first light of morning filtered through the window, I headed for the kitchen. That day, a faint determination welled up within me. Perhaps the weight of resentment from the night before. I sensed I wouldn't be able to bear it any longer. I was quietly preparing breakfast when Martin's thin, trembling voice echoed through the house. "Annie." When I ran to him, I found him crying in his room, clutching his shattered piggy bank. The little porcelain bank's pieces were scattered on the floor, and the coins and small bills he'd saved up for years had vanished. My heart shattered at that moment. I knew Martin said good night to his piggy bank every night before going to sleep. For him, that little piggy bank wasn't just a place to store change. It was a secret companion in which he kept his dreams. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she asked in a trembling voice, "Mom, where did my money go? I hadn't saved any yet." At that moment, my knees weakened. I hugged her, her small body trembling in her arms. I wanted to say, "Mommy's here, don't be afraid," but the words got stuck in my throat. A little later, my ex-husband came into the living room and looked at me with an indifferent expression on his face as if nothing had happened. Jane needed money, Piggy took it from the bank. At that moment, my world fell apart. How was such complacency, such indifference, possible in the face of a child's tears? My voice trembled, but I couldn't keep quiet. That piggy bank was Martin's, a gift from his grandfather, not his father. How could you? "Don't exaggerate, Sophia," she shouted, interrupting me. "After all, I earned that money, and Jane needed it. The child will save again." Martin sobbed, my hands shaking with anger and despair. I held him tighter. In that moment, I saw the alienation in my ex-husband's eyes. It was as if he weren't with us, but in another world. The only thing I could do to ease Martin's pain was to be there for him. I stroked his hair and whispered in his ear, "Don't be sad, my child. You can save it again. Your mother is always with you." But what I was feeling was completely different. In fact, I knew very well at that moment, even if Martin saved up again, that money, that child, had no value in his father's eyes. To a young child, a piggy bank wasn't just change, it was hope. And my ex-husband had shattered his son's hopes for Jane's sake. That afternoon, I broke the silence. It was the first time I'd had an open argument with him. Martin was in the living room, listening out of the corner of his eye as he played with his toy train set. "Can't you see your son's tears?" I said angrily. "Jane is my sister, I have to be with her," he replied coldly. "But Martin is your son, your blood, your child. You're putting him in the background." My ex-husband glared at me, then stood up and left the room. He returned a few minutes later with a thick file in his hand. He slammed it down on the table. When I saw the papers, my heart froze. I scanned them. Divorce papers. At that moment, my breath caught. This was the answer to the resentments I'd been harboring for years, the tears I'd been silently swallowing. "If you don't want it, just sign it," he said harshly. "My patience is limited. I can't live with a woman who despises Jane." Martin silently put down his toy. His tiny eyes looked at me with fear. He ran to me and hugged my hands. With tears still streaming down his cheeks, he whispered, "Mom, you won't leave me, will you?" At that moment, my world fell apart, but my heart also grew stronger. I fell to my knees and hugged my son. "I'll never let go," I said. All I could think was, if anyone should be left, it's you, my ex-husband, not my son. When night came, I chose to sleep next to Martin. His little body was still restless, crying even in his dreams. As I stroked his hair, a decision formed in my mind. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I wasn't just going to be patient anymore. To wipe my son's tears, I had to break my own chains first. And without knowing it, I was taking the first step towards the biggest transformation of my life. The next morning, I started the day with a weak smile. Martin's eyes were still puffy from sleep, but when he looked at me at breakfast and said, "Mom, smile today, okay?" my heart sank. My son was trying to give me strength. He was only 4, but it was as if he could feel the weight on my shoulders and carry it with me. The crackling of the toaster in the kitchen mingled with the aroma of coffee as I prepared breakfast. Meanwhile, Martin was drawing in his chair, swinging his leg. "Look, Mom, I drew the slide you and I used to ride on at the park," he said. The lines on the small piece of paper were crooked, but there was a face smiling confidently at me. In that moment, I realized that to Martin, I wasn't just a mother. I was his only safe haven. I decided to make that day special. I called work and got permission. My boss must have noticed my trembling voice, because he was understanding without asking too many questions. I took Martin's little hands and went to the park together. We played hide and seek in the playground, slid down the slide, and built imaginary castles in the sandbox. Martin was laughing, his laughter echoing in the air. That laugh was a miracle to me. It was the only thing that could soothe all a mother's pain. We returned home around noon. We ate lunch, tired but happy. As soon as Martin was full, he laid his head on my knees and fell asleep. His small breaths were like a song laid upon my chest. As I stroked his hair, I found peace within me for the first time in a long time. But that peace did not last long. A sharp knock on the door startled me. It was only 2 in the afternoon, too early for my ex-husband to be home. My heart began to pound. I stood quietly, picked up Martin, and went into the large bedroom closet. I held my breath, listening through the crack in the door. The sound of shoes echoed through the house, then a familiar voice, Jane's voice. "Oh no, not again, not here either." I gasped. My hands began to shake. He was casually opening drawers and rummaging around the kitchen. He was clearly looking for something. He was prowling around my own home, among my own belongings, like an uninvited thief. I heard him take out his phone. Even though he tried to keep the volume down, I listened from inside the closet. "Brother, I couldn't find it again. The cards aren't here. Are you sure you put them here?" My heart leaped. They must have been talking about money. And even though my ex-husband's voice wasn't there, his presence seemed to permeate the entire room. Jane's hurried steps were interrupted by the door slamming shut. I took a deep breath. Martin stirred in my arms but didn't wake from his sleep. The innocence on his face filled me with even greater fear. How much longer could I stay in a house like this? This house was no longer my home. It was a place where strangers could come and go at will, where trust had completely vanished. That evening, I made my decision. I packed a few clothes for Martin, his favorite teddy bear, and a small photo album. I grabbed my phone and wallet. We left the house in silence, walked to the bus stop and took the train to my parents'. It was a short 2-stop journey, but it felt like a lifetime. Martin sat on the couch, looking out the window, and asked, "Mom, where are we going?" I hugged him tightly. "To stay a while, to your grandparents." When they opened the door, my mother looked me in the eyes. She didn't ask anything. She understood everything about me. She wrapped us in her arms. My father picked up Martin and kissed his forehead. The relief that flashed across my child's face at that moment gave me something more powerful than words could ever describe. That night, I talked to my mother. I told her about Jane sneaking into the house, her quest for money, and my ex-husband's blind devotion to his sister. My mother sighed deeply. "My daughter, they intend to consume both your pockets and your heart. Be very careful. I know you have secrets, but now is the time." That's when I confessed to my mother. I was still earning income from the small business I'd once built, and that I had savings I'd never told my ex-husband about. I'd kept this fact a secret because I'd noticed his irresponsibility in spending early on. My mother nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "That's why they came in and out of your house. They're after those cards, those accounts. They don't want to see you anymore. They want to see your money." My father clenched his fist, his face contorted in anger as he remembered Martin's broken piggy bank. "I will not let this go. I will hold anyone who makes my granddaughter cry accountable." But I knew that reason, not war, would prevail. A new determination, as well as fear, was growing inside me. I had to take action now, not just for my own peace of mind, but for Martin's future as well. That night, Martin slept next to my mother. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a single sentence echoed within me. "There is no turning back now, Sophia. This is the end of trying to save this marriage." The next day, my mother's words were ringing in my ears. "They don't want to see you anymore. They want to see your money." He was right. All my doubts had been replaced by a stark reality. My ex-husband and Jane's only concern was the money I'd saved for Martin's future. I had to prove it. With my father's advice, I secretly devised a plan. I would return home, record our conversations, and expose the truth to everyone. I placed my phone in my bag and turned on the voice recorder. The device began recording silently on the table while I pretended to cook in the kitchen. After a while, the door opened. My ex-husband walked in, a stern expression on his face. Without even saying hello, he got straight to the point. "Sophia, give me your cards. Jane's debt is growing. You need my money anyway. You don't need to work." I put the knife in my hand down on the table. The anger building up inside me burned my lips, but I held myself back. I answered in a calm voice. "No, that money is for Martin's future, not to pay off your brother's debts." My ex-husband narrowed his eyes. He took a step closer and raised his voice. "I'm winning this house. Whatever I say goes. Get those cards out now." The more he remained silent, the angrier he became. Finally, he threw a thick file onto the table. The same documents again. Divorce papers. "Sign this," he shouted. "You're already living off my money. Martin doesn't need anything. Jane is my family. I'll help her." At that moment, my vision darkened. My heart felt like it was about to burst from my chest. Martin had heard those words. His eyes were filled with tears when he entered the room. His small lips quivered as he asked me, "Mom, why does my dad always love my aunt? Aren't I his son?" I fell to my knees and hugged my son. All the chains inside me broke. At that moment, I made my decision. I lifted my head and looked into my ex-husband's eyes. "I won't stay in this house anymore. My family is my son, and you are a stranger." The phone was still recording. Her yelling at me while defending Jane, her disregard for Martin, it was all recorded. Now I had evidence. I put the divorce papers in my bag. I held Martin's hand. As I headed for the door, my ex-husband shouted after me, "Don't come back. This house is closed for you." I didn't turn around, because a voice inside me whispered to me, it was already closed. That night, I went back to my parents. We played the recording on my phone to my father and his lawyer friend. Everything was crystal clear now. Jane's irresponsibility, my ex-husband's blind addiction, and their complete disregard for our lives, it would all come out. Martin had fallen asleep in my mother's arms at that moment. There was a sense of peace on his little face. As I looked at him, I promised myself, this time, no one will steal his future. And dear viewers, this is where our story takes a breathtaking turn. This decision Sophia makes will completely change both her son's life and her own. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the story's finale. This channel shares with you the painful yet hopeful stories of real life. By morning, my phone was filled with hundreds of missed calls and dozens of messages, all from my ex-husband. "Come back, let's talk, you misunderstood," he'd write. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Behind those tears lay only fear and self-interest. A new life was beginning for me, for Martin. When I entered our lawyer's office, the two potted plants by the window seemed to be competing with each other for the sun. I, however, couldn't surrender the darkness I carried within to that warm light. I placed the audio recording on the table. The lawyer adjusted his glass, picked up the phone, and began listening. My ex-husband's commanding voice, his rising anger at the mention of Jane's name, the moments when he insisted, "Give me the cards." Everything poured out one by one, like a continuous chain. At the end of the recording, the lawyer nodded. "This proves intent. We will also strengthen the case with a written chronology and transcripts. We won't rush any of the steps." We spent the rest of that day at a strategy table, recouping the silence of years past. The lawyer said, "Stay calm, take it one step at a time." That's what I did. First, I contacted the bank. We fixed all notifications for the savings account I'd opened in Martin's name to my number. Then I took photos of my spare cards in the safe at my mother's house and recorded their serial numbers. I set up encrypted backups on my phone. This wasn't just a separation. It was a clever campaign to protect my son's future against theft, addiction, and indifference. That afternoon, while my mother was slowly stirring the soup in the kitchen, my father placed a notebook on the table. The cover read, "Sophia's Notes, Truth Notebook." "Write down every event, date, and time," he said. "Who said what, where? It will all come in handy one day." I obeyed. Not just him, but finally, I obeyed myself. Because for years, while conforming to others' orders, I had silenced my own inner voice and mistaken patience for love. As night fell, my phone was again blowing up with calls. My ex-husband would text, "You misunderstood, let's talk." "Jane's in a difficult situation," he would say. "If we work together, we can figure it out." For once, I was brief and direct. "My son's future is non-negotiable." Then I hung up and lay down next to Martin. His small breaths were like a prayer, sealing my decision. The next day, my lawyer and I went to family court. The hallway was a long tunnel filled with whispers and the clatter of shoes. When we entered, my ex-husband was waiting. His gaze lacked the self-assuredness I'd grown accustomed to. He suddenly flinched at the mention of the recording, and the chair next to him creaked slightly. I said nothing. I let the documents speak for themselves. My lawyer presented the court with the recording, along with the chronology, the cake at midnight, the fruitcake being taken from Martin's presence, the breaking of the piggy bank, Jane's intrusion and the search using the door lock, and the impact of all this on Martin's state of mind. The judge listened in silence. The only sound audible through the silence was the scratching of his pen whenever Martin's name was mentioned. Finally, she turned to my ex-husband. "Why are you putting your child's needs second?" My ex-husband attempted to deny the obvious. My sister, she was in a difficult situation," he muttered. The judge winced. Not everyone in a difficult situation can steal a child's rights. After the hearing, the interim orders were announced. I have temporary custody of Martin, supervised visits with the father, at intervals determined by the psychiatrist. Monthly child support was awarded for the child. It may have been small, but the words at the bottom of the order marked the end of an era for me. The best interests of the child. I was aligned with a child who deserved to grow up, not with a man who expected to grow up for his own benefit. As I left the courtroom, my ex-husband called after me. I turned. His eyes weren't as hard as before. They were tired and blurry. I didn't want it to be like this, he said. I remained silent, because sometimes the most compassionate sentence is silence. I kept walking, and my father held my hand. In that moment, I felt like a little girl. But for the first time, I wasn't ashamed. Vulnerability isn't defeat. It's the most honest state on a person's journey back to themselves. In the weeks that followed, things unraveled quickly. My lawyer clarified the boundaries of the post-nuptial property agreement. My personal savings and benefits from work were secured. I created a new payment plan for my management fee from the company. I made my payroll transparent, but maintained sole signature authority. The source of Jane's debts was revealed: gambling, shopping, and fraudulent apps promising easy money. My ex-husband's signature looms large beneath the bond. As the numbers grew, his sense of responsibility diminished. To increase security, I notified the apartment management, changed the locks, and shared a coded door notice with the neighbors. We began play-based counseling for Martin. As the sun rose in his drawings, the shadow on his face began to shrink. One evening, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found my ex-husband's parents standing there. Their eyes were bright red. I involuntarily took a step back, but my mother whispered from behind, "My daughter, you are not alone." The guests were ushered in. The silence was heavy. Finally, the man spoke. "We are ashamed of what our son has done. We wanted to apologize to our grandson." Tears welled up in my eyes. Family wasn't just about sharing the same surname. It was about having the courage to stand in the right place. I offered them tea. "Martin will be here in a minute," I said. "You adults should apologize first. Children grow up under the light of actions, not words." When the process was over, the court finalized the divorce. The moment I held the decision in my hands, an invisible weight I'd carried for years suddenly fell away. The paper was just paper. What mattered was the self-respect it had restored to me. After the hearing, my ex-husband wanted to speak once more. My lawyer politely intervened. He could only say, "Be happy. I will try to be a good father to Martin." The harsh edges of the word "if only" swirled within me, but I didn't speak it. A life shouldn't be built on "if only," but on "from now on." The court ordered a monthly child support payment of $304 for the child. Payments would be automatically deposited into Martin's account the first week of each month, and enforcement proceedings would be initiated if the payment was late. Visitation days were contingent upon a school report. The first 3 months were supervised, with the possibility of extending the following 3 months based on adherence to a behavioral plan. The judge also approved changing the locks on our house and placing a preventative measure against unauthorized entry by third parties, especially Jane. Thus, for the first time, our house was, on paper, ours. A few days after the verdict, my ex-husband called. His voice cracked. "I admit it," he said. "I came back for your money. I signed off on Jane's debts, and I couldn't get out." It was an emotional confession, but it was too late. I spoke briefly over the recorded line. "Thank you for your confession. If you want to be a good father to Martin, prove your words with your payment plan." When I hung up, I felt a sense of relief. It turns out compassion and compassion can exist in the same sentence. That evening, my ex-mother-in-law called in tears. "We let you down. We banned them from the house. Can we see my grandchild?" My heart ached, but my mind prevailed. Following the pedagogue's schedule, yes. Being a family sometimes meant building a bridge between two wrongs. I rewrote the rules from the very beginning so no one could burn that bridge. I began writing my "from now on" with the office window wide open. When I announced that I was taking over the company again, I adjusted my work hours around Martin's daycare schedule. I rented a small office near our house, one that got morning sunlight. On the desk, I framed the picture of the crooked slide Martin had drawn at the park. Every morning, as I drank my coffee, I looked at it and reminded myself, the measure of success is the path you take without breaking your child's heart. Of course, things didn't get better right away. At night, when the house quieted, sometimes the fears returned. My mind replayed the click of the doorknob, Jane's search for a drawer, the crack of the piggy bank breaking. But there was a difference now. I wasn't the one storing those moments. I was the one learning from them. Every day, I wrote 3 lines in my notebook. What did you protect today? What did you heal today? Who were you grateful to today? The answers were mostly the same. I protected Martin. I healed my heart. I am grateful to my mother, my father, and myself. One Sunday morning, while walking to the park with Martin, we saw a strawberry cake in the window of a small bakery. Our eyes met. We both laughed at the same time. We went inside and took a slice of the smallest size. Who owns the cake this time? Martin asked, chuckling. You, I said. Always you. As we shared that slice on the bench, an indescribable peace coursed through me for the first time in years, like steam rising not from the cold marble of justice, but from the warm bread of right choices. That evening at home, as my mother was setting the plates on the table, my father looked up. My daughter, he said, you won a difficult battle, not with brute force, but with intelligence. In this house, the conversation will no longer be about fear, but about planning. I smiled, because even if a plan doesn't silence the beating of the heart, it reveals its direction. Now I knew my direction. The future wasn't a wind whispering Martin's name. It was supposed to be solid ground that strengthened his steps. That night, while Martin was sleeping, I entered his room. In place of the broken piggy bank was a new, sturdy piggy bank his grandfather had bought, a label we had written on it together. Hope. I ran my hand through his hair and whispered, Son, hope is no longer a locked box. It's an open road we build together. I cracked the window open. The distant lights of the city were flickering and fading, and the first sliver of morning was emerging from the darkness. I returned to my own room. On the last page of the notebook, I wrote a sentence in capital letters. Love is not generosity without limits. Love is courage that can draw boundaries. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. No alarm, no shadow remained within me. Only a deep breath and a silent thank you. Not to those who betrayed me, but to the trials that brought me back to myself. The next morning, as the sun filtered through the curtains, Martin woke and wrapped his arms around my neck. Mom, he said, what are we going to do today? I smiled. Today we're going to pack up our house. We're going to make room for our new life. As I prepared breakfast in the kitchen, a song started playing on the radio. Its lyrics, without me knowing it, told my story. You become ashes, but you are reborn. In that moment, I realized that the label, widowed mother, wasn't a burden, but a badge. It taught me to stand tall, not to slouch while carrying it. On my way to work, I closed the door and turned the key. The only sound echoing down the hallway was Martin's cheerful footsteps. The wind outside was cool, but the air inside me was clear. One day, when he's older, I'll tell him, a mother's strength lies not in raising her voice, but in her ability to close the right door at the right time. Children grow up in the world that's built in front of them, not behind that door. I didn't think along the way. I had made up my mind. Life wasn't about carrying the stains of the past, but about multiplying the light of today. And I vowed to multiply that light. And we are very safe now.